They say family is everything, but what if that belief is quietly destroying your peace? According to recent studies, nearly 1 in 3 elderly parents who move closer to their adult children end up feeling more isolated, stressed, or emotionally dependent than before. It's a harsh truth hidden behind smiles at family dinners and weekend visits. And maybe it's happening to you without you even realizing it. You may think you're just staying close for love, for support, for connection. But what if that closeness is creating invisible wounds? What if the very decision meant to bring you peace is slowly taking away your freedom, your identity, and your joy? In this video, we're going to explore a reality few people dare to talk about, the unspoken tension of aging near your children. But more importantly, we'll show that there is a way forward. Through psychology, real stories, and powerful research, you'll discover how to reclaim your independence, rebuild purpose, and strengthen relationships, not through proximity, but through true connection. And somewhere in this journey, you'll hear a story that might sound exactly like yours, but with one surprising twist, a detail that changes everything you thought you knew about what it means to age well. So take a breath, clear your distractions, and listen closely. Because what you're about to hear might not only change how you see your family, it might change how you see yourself. They say there's nothing like growing old surrounded by your family, especially your children. The media tells us it's the dream. A cozy home nearby, grandchildren visiting every weekend, warm dinners full of laughter and legacy. It sounds perfect, safe, familiar. But what if this picture-perfect idea is just that? A picture, a fantasy carefully painted by movies, traditions, and well-meaning voices that forgot to mention the cracks beneath the surface. We've been sold a vision, one where aging parents and adult children live in harmony, proximity guarantees connection, and time spent together always leads to joy. But behind closed doors, away from the smiling family photos, reality often tells a different story. One filled with quiet disappointments, unmet expectations, emotional distance, and sometimes complete silence. Cultural norms and religious teachings have long reinforced this ideal. In many societies, it's seen as a moral duty. Children must stay close and parents must be cared for at all costs. The Western world romanticizes independence but still holds on to the belief that family is everything. Meanwhile, Eastern philosophies like Confucianism preach filial piety as sacred, where a child's devotion defines their worth. In both worlds, the pressure is immense. But here's the truth. Proximity doesn't always mean connection, and obligation doesn't always mean love. As we age, something deeper begins to stir. The fear of solitude creeps in. The walls grow quieter. Friends pass. Our role in society starts to fade. And in that silence, we reach. We reach for what feels familiar. Our children. We imagine their presence will fill the void, that their lives will somehow become extensions of our own, that their love will cure our loneliness. But love doesn't always come packaged in daily visits or shared dinners. Sometimes love is busy, tired, absent, and not because it doesn't care, but because it's human. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people, not because we hate them, but because living in close quarters forces us to confront who we are and who they've become." Aging parents living near adult children often find themselves face to face with a new reality. Their children are no longer children. They have their own lives, rhythms, boundaries, and expectations. And when those don't align with ours, conflict brews, not always loud, but painfully persistent. Think about this. Have we mistaken physical closeness for emotional intimacy? Is being in the same neighborhood enough to feel loved, seen, understood? Studies from Oxford and the Pew Research Center reveal that many older adults who moved closer to their children report a decline in emotional well-being. Not because they're unwanted, but because their presence didn't create the connection they hoped for. The Sunday dinners didn't come. The grandkids were busy. The silence grew louder, now wrapped in disappointment. And this disappointment cuts deeper than loneliness ever did, because it comes with expectation, with hope, with the belief that this time things will be different. But instead, reality sinks in. The roles have shifted. You are no longer the center of their world. And maybe that's exactly how it should be. But letting go of that idea is a form of grief that rarely gets named. There's also a practical truth we don't often discuss. Adult children are overwhelmed. Many are part of what experts call the sandwich generation, caring for their own kids, climbing career ladders, and now expected to emotionally and physically support aging parents. They're tired, they're stretched thin, and when we assume their presence will heal our emptiness, we unknowingly place a weight on them they were never trained to carry. This creates a silent contract, one where both parties feel they're giving, and yet both feel emotionally shortchanged. Parents feel ignored, children feel suffocated, conversations become polite, but not honest. Visits feel obligatory, and love begins to hide behind tension neither side knows how to name. This isn't the fantasy we were promised. This is the reality we live with when no one speaks the truth. So the question remains, why are we still chasing this ideal? Why do we cling to it so tightly, even when evidence and experience whisper otherwise? Maybe because it's safer to believe in the dream than to face the uncomfortable truth, that true peace in old age may come not from who we live near, but from what we make of the life we still have. As the philosopher Viktor Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Perhaps the fantasy isn't wrong, just incomplete. Perhaps it's not about recreating the past with our children, but about reinventing the future for ourselves. We expect them to be our anchor, when maybe, just maybe, we were always supposed to learn how to swim on our own. But if the dream was a lie, what happens when we try to live it anyway? And so, the dream begins to unravel. What once felt like love and connection starts to take on a different shape, something heavier, more demanding, less free. You don't notice it at first. It hides behind good intentions, affectionate words, and the silent hope that being near your children will make everything feel right again. But slowly, a new truth starts to form. Not all closeness is healthy. Not all love sets you free. In the quiet spaces of aging, when routines slow and silence grows louder, it's easy to start reaching for company, for validation, for emotional anchors in the faces of your children. You tell yourself it's natural. After all, they are your legacy. You raised them. You gave up so much for them. But the moment your peace begins to rely on their availability, their attention, their time, that's the moment something shifts. You're no longer living your own life. You're living theirs. This is where emotional dependence begins, not with malice, but with need. A slow erosion of boundaries disguised as care. It often sounds like love, but it feels like guilt. A phone call not answered becomes a reason to worry. A visit postponed feels like rejection. And before long, your well-being is completely tied to their behavior. You stop asking, what do I want to do today, and instead think, will they come today? That subtle change of focus, from inward to outward, is the crack where resentment seeps in, and it doesn't end there. Emotional dependence rarely stays in one relationship. It spills into others, creating what psychologists call emotional triangulation, a dynamic where you, your children, and sometimes even your grandchildren become part of a quiet emotional tug-of-war. The grandfather who vents to his granddaughter about how her father never calls. The mother who cries to her daughter-in-law about how she feels forgotten. No one wants to hurt anyone, but everyone walks away carrying someone else's burden. What started as love becomes obligation. What began as presence turns into pressure. The Stanford psychology department has long studied codependency within families, especially in multi-generational households. Their research shows that when one person becomes the emotional center for another's stability, both parties begin to suffer. The child feels trapped, like they can never do enough. And the parent, even when receiving attention, feels unsatisfied. Because what they really crave isn't a visit, it's purpose, meaning, a reason to still matter, beyond just being someone's mother or father. And this is the hardest truth to admit. Sometimes the need to be near is not about love. It's about fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of becoming irrelevant in a world that keeps moving forward. And so, you cling to the one thing that always gave you meaning, your children. But here's the cost no one talks about. When you define your worth by someone else's life, you give away the power to shape your own. The signs are subtle, but they're there. You never call me anymore. I guess I don't matter now that you have your own family. I raised you and this is what I get. These aren't just words, they're unspoken contracts. Contracts that say, you are responsible for my happiness now. And as the guilt builds, so does the distance. Not physical distance, emotional distance. Because when love starts to feel like a burden, the instinct isn't to come closer, it's to pull away. And still, you may tell yourself, but I only want to feel close. Yes, But there's a difference between closeness and control, between love freely given and love demanded. Healthy relationships breathe. They allow space, freedom, choice. Dependence, emotional, invisible, silent, takes that space away, slowly, quietly, until no one can breathe without the other, and both are left gasping. This isn't a story of blame. It's a mirror, a reflection of how easy it is to fall into patterns that feel like love, but grow from fear. It's human to want connection. It's noble to crave meaning. But when your entire emotional world begins and ends at your child's front door, it's time to ask, who have you become without them? And maybe even more important, who could you still become if you stop needing them to complete you? Because love, when it gets heavy, sometimes it breaks. And what if staying close and without balance, without freedom, causes more pain than the distance you've always feared? Before we continue, I want to ask you something, not just as a viewer, but as someone who's lived, loved, and perhaps even felt some of what we've talked about so far. If this message is touching something in you, if you've ever felt like you were giving too much, needing too much, or simply longing to be seen, pause for a moment. Let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and share a piece of your story, even if it's just a sentence. Have you ever felt like you were holding on too tight? Or maybe, like someone was holding too tightly to you? And while you're here, don't forget to like this video if it's resonating with you. It helps more people find this kind of reflection. And maybe, just maybe, it reaches someone who really needs to hear it today. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because the next part of this journey is one of the most important. Ready to go deeper? Let's continue. Sometimes the war doesn't look like shouting. It doesn't come with slammed doors or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's silent, a slow tension, built room by room, hour by hour, inside homes where generations live too close and speak too little. At first it seems like love. A mother moves closer to her son. A father lives just down the street from his daughter. But behind the warm gestures and good intentions, something starts to build. Quiet frustrations, unspoken rules, lives lived in parallel, not in harmony. This is the silent war of proximity, a battle not of hatred, but of unmet expectations, generational clashes, and emotional boundaries that were never clearly drawn. What makes it so painful is that no one wants to talk about it, because if we admit it, if we say it out loud, that maybe being close wasn't the answer, it feels like betrayal of family, of love, of everything we thought was right. Sociologists call this the generational gap, but in real life it feels more like an emotional collision. Parents raised in one era with one set of values, suddenly sharing space, or at least streets, with adult children who live by completely different rhythms. One wakes early, the other works late. One expects Sunday dinners, the other just wants a quiet weekend. One believes in discipline, the other in freedom. What begins as small differences turns into daily friction, and neither side wants to admit how exhausted they feel trying to keep the peace. Recent reports from the BBC Family Life series and investigations published by The Guardian reveal a sharp increase in familial breakdowns among families who chose to live close or together after retirement. In countless cases, what was meant to bring families closer ended up tearing them apart. The cause? Not hatred, not disrespect, but pressure. Invisible pressure to conform, to show up, to adjust. And when no one says anything, it all builds up inside. Adult children speak of feeling trapped, not out of lack of love, but from being pulled in every direction. Between raising their kids, managing their careers, and trying to be there for aging parents, they begin to lose themselves. Many describe it as walking on eggshells, trying not to hurt feelings, trying to be good sons, good daughters, while their own lives fall into the background. And still the guilt lingers. Am I doing enough? Why do I feel resentful when I should feel grateful? Parents, on the other hand, often feel they're walking through a house that no longer belongs to them, even if it's one they paid for. They want to help, but their help feels unwanted. They offer advice, and it's received as criticism. They try to guide, and it's seen as interference. Especially when it comes to grandchildren, this becomes a lightning rod. Don't give them sugar. That's not how we raise them. Please, not now, Dad. We're trying something different. And just like that, decades of experience, of sacrifice, of love, get shut out in a single sentence. But what hurts more than conflict is the silence. Because silence doesn't heal, it hides. It buries old wounds beneath politeness and small talk. The house gets quieter, but not more peaceful. The visits become shorter, the conversations safer, until one day both sides realize they're pretending that everything's fine, while quietly grieving the family they used to be, or the one they thought they'd become. Sometimes the deepest wounds in a family are the ones no one dares to speak of. And yet we must ask, what if the problem isn't the children? What if it's not the parents either? What if the real issue is the life that slowly stopped being yours? Because in trying to stay close, you may have lost the space to be yourself, your rhythms, your peace, your independence. And without realizing it, you exchanged your freedom for a seat at the table that no longer has your name on it. So now, what do you do with that truth? Angela had always envisioned her golden years surrounded by family, believing that proximity to her son in Los Angeles would provide the comfort and connection she sought. Yet, as the days blended into routine visits and unspoken tensions, she felt an unsettling void. The vibrant woman who once danced through life's challenges now found herself confined by expectations, both hers and those of her family. One evening, while reminiscing over old photographs, Angela stumbled upon an image of herself painting by the seaside, a passion she'd abandoned long ago. The realization struck her. In her pursuit of familial closeness, she'd drifted away from her own essence. Determined to rediscover herself, Angela made a bold decision. She moved out of her son's neighborhood and joined a senior co-housing community on the outskirts of the city. In this new environment, Angela was embraced by a tapestry of individuals, each with their own stories and aspirations. The community thrived on mutual support, shared experiences, and a collective zest for life. With renewed enthusiasm, Angela picked up her paintbrushes, transforming blank canvases into reflections of her rejuvenated spirit. The colors she once reserved for others now painted her own narrative, but her renaissance didn't stop there. Angela opened her heart to companionship, embarking on dates that rekindled the fluttering excitement of youth. These relationships weren't about filling a void, but celebrating her autonomy and the joy of shared moments. Interestingly, as Angela flourished independently, her relationship with her son underwent a transformation. Freed from the weight of unspoken obligations and daily expectations, their interactions became more intentional and heartfelt. They began to appreciate each other not out of duty, but from genuine affection and mutual respect. Angela's journey underscores a profound truth: the importance of emotional autonomy and the reclamation of identity beyond the roles we've played. After decades of nurturing others, it's vital to turn inward, exploring passions, dreams, and facets of ourselves that may have been overshadowed. Finding purpose in later years can manifest in myriad ways, be it through artistic endeavors, spiritual exploration, community involvement, or cultivating new friendships. Engaging in activities that resonate with one's soul not only enriches daily life, but also fosters a sense of fulfillment and vitality. For those seeking alternatives to co-residing with family, options abound. Senior co-housing communities like the one Angela joined offer a blend of independence and camaraderie. These intentional neighborhoods are designed to promote social interaction while respecting personal space. Similarly, senior villages provide networks of support, connecting elders with services and social opportunities within their existing communities. Independent living arrangements with accessible support ensure that while assistance is available, autonomy remains paramount. Research from the American Psychological Association highlights that older adults who maintain independence often experience enhanced well-being and mental health. Autonomy fosters a sense of control, purpose, and engagement with life, which are crucial components of overall happiness in later years. Rebuilding relationships with adult children doesn't necessitate physical closeness. In fact, creating space can lead to healthier dynamics. Regular communication, setting boundaries, and cherishing quality interactions over quantity can bridge emotional distances more effectively than mere proximity. As Angela's story illustrates, sometimes the path to deeper familial bonds begins with a journey back to oneself. By prioritizing personal growth and happiness, we not only enrich our own lives, but also bring our best selves to our relationships. Remember, sometimes, the best way to love your children is by loving yourself first. If you've made it this far, and thank you, truly. It means you didn't just watch a video, you walked through a reflection. You allowed yourself to feel, to question, and maybe even to confront some truths that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. That takes courage. That takes heart. What we talked about here wasn't easy. It touched places many would rather leave untouched. But growth, real growth, only happens when we're willing to sit in that discomfort, look honestly at our choices, and ask, what kind of life do I still want to live? If this video resonated with you, if it made you think differently about your journey, your family, or your next chapter, I invite you to be part of this space. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, not just for the content, but for the community, because there are thousands of people out there, just like you, navigating the same emotions, the same questions, the same crossroads. You are not alone. And before you go, pause for just a moment and share something in the comments. Tell us where you're from, tell us your story, or simply write what this video awakened in you, because your voice matters, your experience matters, and someone out there might read it and feel a little more understood, a little more seen. We spend so much of our lives giving to others, often forgetting the one person who's been with us through it all, ourselves. Maybe now is the time to come home, not to a house, not to a neighborhood, but to who you really are. Because sometimes, the best way to love your children is by loving yourself first. Thank you for being here. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never stop becoming who you were always meant to be.